Okay, today we're going to do graphs of secant and cosecant. Let's remember that secant is the reciprocal of 1 over cosine and cosecant is 1 over sine. So when we have cosine equals 0, secant's undefined, and whenever sine equals 0, cosecant is undefined. So where is cosine 0? That would be at pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Where is sine 0? Well, at 0, pi, 2 pi, so on and so forth, right? Alright, so that means that where it's undefined is a vertical asymptote. We can find the equations of vertical asymptotes by putting k. So for cosine it's going to be pi over 2 plus pi k. Now, let's look at what these graphs have to actually look like. So let's say cosine would have been 1, 0, negative 1, 0, and 1. And that gave us our wave. But because secant is the reciprocal, we still have 1. We have undefined, negative 1, undefined, and 1. Alright, so I'm going to graph the secant. So at 0, it is at 1. At pi over 2, we have a vertical asymptote since it's undefined. At pi, we're at negative 1. At 3 pi over 2, we have another vertical asymptote. And at 2 pi, we're at 1 again. Now remember, we are graphing right now a full period, which is 2 pi. As you can see, this almost looks like our cosine, except for the fact that we have asymptotes there, correct? And what happens with our graph is it goes kind of a reflection of it. So we are going to get these U's. Okay. Now, something I want to point out is that with secant, we're going to start at 1, so we don't start at an asymptote, and we end in the same place. So this is one period of secant. Again, you could see that cosine in there in that curve. Okay. Now let's go over to cosecant. So let's fill out sine first. We have 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. So if we do the reciprocal, we get undefined, 1, undefined, negative 1, undefined. Those are our asymptotes. Which means our y-axis is an asymptote. At pi over 2, we're at 1. At pi, we have an asymptote. At 3 pi over 2, we're at negative 1. And at 2 pi, we are at, or we have another asymptote. So again, this is the full period. This looks like our sine graph, right? Looks like our sine graph. But since we have our asymptotes and we are doing cosecant, we have our flips. So this is the full period. As you can see with cosecant, we start with an asymptote. So now let's do some phase shifts and transformations. So first thing we want to talk about is the period and how it changes. So 2 pi over b would give us the period of pi. And it looks like the amplitude changes to 3. No vertical shift, no phase shift. Okay. So, remember we're going to divide that into 4. Okay, so we start at 0, and then we have pi over 4, add it to itself, we get pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and there is our ending period of pi. So guys, we are just doing one full period. Alright, now with secant, we start with our point. Now usually we would start it at 1, but we know we're going the amplitude of 3. So if there's no vertical shift, we go up 1, 2, 3. So there's our point. That means our next mark is the asymptote. Our next mark should have been -1, but we're doing a amplitude of 3. So instead of -1, we're going to go down 3. Our next one is our vertical asymptote, and then at pi it would have been at 1, but our amplitude is 3. So we have our kind of half a U, our upside down U, and our half of U. And we did it. Okay, so let's do cosecant. We have our period is 2 pi over 1. We have a, let's do our vertical shift of 2. Amplitude is 1, and our phase shift is to the right, pi over 4. Just like we were starting with cosine and sine, we start with our phase shift. Okay guys, so we're going to start with pi over 4. Sorry, I'm waiting for it to focus. Okay, so when we do 2 pi divided by 4, because that's our period in 4 sections, we are going by pi over 2. So we're going to add pi over 2 each time. If we add pi over 4 and pi over 2, we get 3 pi over 4. If we add another pi over 2, we get 5 pi over 4. So that's 2 of them. Another pi over 2 gives us 7 pi over 4. We have to add one more. We get 9 pi over 4. So again, I can divide my period up into 4 equal spots and then add that each time to know where the next mark is. Alright, this is cosecant, which means we start with an asymptote. So our pi over 4 is going to be an asymptote, which also means every other one is an asymptote. Now, be careful on the vertical shift and the amplitude. So the vertical shift is at 2, which means for our coordinates we have to go 1 above and 1 below. So here we would have shifted up 2, and then we have to go up 1 more. Okay, at 7 pi over 4 we would have shifted up 2, but then the amplitude is 1, so we have to go down 1. Okay, think of this is our vertical shift, so 1 up and 1 down from it. So we have our U facing up, and our U facing down. Alright, secant, so period equals 2 pi over 1/2, simplifies into 4 pi. We have no vertical shift, amplitude is 1, but we do have a phase shift of left pi over 6. So let's do that pi over 6 first. So negative pi over 6. Okay, now we need to divide this by 4, which is pi. So we're going to add pi on each of these. So negative pi over 6 plus pi is 5 pi over 6, plus another pi is 11 pi over 6. Another pi is 17 pi over 6. And our last one, 23 pi over 6. This is secant, so we start with a coordinate, and then everyone after that, every other one, is our asymptote. Okay, now there's no vertical shift, so we're going to start on the x-axis, but our amp is only 1. Alright, start on the x-axis, our amp is only 1. X-axis, amp is only 1. Okay, now our half of U, that's upside down, and our other half of U. Okay, so big thing is, remember, secant you start with a point for the period, where cosecant we start with an asymptote. One more and then we are done, guys. So the first thing we need to do is factor out that pi over 4 to get that b. So x plus, when we take out a pi over 4 we get 3. So the period is 2 pi over pi over 4. This simplifies to 8. We have an amplitude of 2 and a phase shift of left 3. Alright. Start with our phase shift. So 1, 2, 3. So we're at -3. Let's see how far we go. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. So we're going to go every 2. So -3, -1, 1, 3, and 5. Okay. I'm going to erase this tick mark so we're not confused. There's nothing there. Okay. Cosecant, we start with what? An asymptote. And every other tick mark is our asymptote. Alright, no vertical shift. And we're not flipping it, by the way. None of our questions could be flipped. So remember, if there's a negative out front, instead of starting on top, we're starting on the bottom. Just to keep that for future reference. So, our amplitude, though, is 2. So here we start on the X, and we go down 2. Up. And down. Alright guys, we have just graphed a bunch of secants and cosecant.